Rule number one for organization. Everything has a home. And today, we're gonna make one for all this wood that's just laying around on the dance floor. My shop is an ever-growing, ever-evolving work in progress where nothing ever stays in one place for very long, and it's not that I have commitment issues. The new wood crib will come complete with a balcony and breakfast nooks, all on wheels so it can work remotely, whenever I change my mind. Plans for the impending Lumber Mule linked down below. We'll get into why this design is so effective a little later on, but first, we gotta build it. The radial arm saw demands a sacrifice, for which we offer a fresh pile of pine, sopping wet, courtesy of the Gnome Depot. They're all pretty straight for now, but when these bad boys acclimate, all bets are off. Best practice is to let the boards sit for at least 5 weeks and probe them with moisture meters to be certain they won't get up and start walking around when you turn your back on them. I don't got the patience for all that, so we're just gonna roll the dice and see what happens. But if you're not a dice roller and looking to work wood the right way, then I suggest you check out the sponsor of today's video, Woodworkers Guild of America. Woodworkers Guild of America is your go-to online resource for woodworking ideas, instructions, and information. Their site offers an immense library of plans, articles, and premium videos with topics ranging from cabinet making, joinery, sharpening, and finishing, to more specialized areas like turning, bandsaw techniques, and shop safety, all taught by professional woodworkers. I recently got schooled on proper screw usage. Who would have thunk that not all screws are actually created equal, and using the screws designed for the job at hand can save you both money and headache? See, even on these topics I thought I knew inside and out, these videos all seem to offer some bit of wisdom I didn't know. You'll see me using the correct screws later on in this build. Woodworkers Guild of America is always uploading new content, so there's always something fresh to learn. It's a great way to sharpen your skills, whether you're tackling your very first project or refining advanced techniques. You can also connect with their community to ask questions, get feedback, and stay inspired. And right now, Woodworkers Guild of America is offering the first 1,000 people to click the link down in the description or pinned comment below, or scan the QR code on screen, a full year of premium membership for $1.49. Yes, that's the actual price. Well worth it, y'all. Scan the QR code or click the link down below to join Woodworkers Guild of America before this offer goes away forever. I found getting construction lumber down to 1.25 inches thick does a pretty good job of removing any warpage or bullshit, assuming it was already pretty straight in the first place. This is a lot to get through, and the entire house is already starting to smell like a hamster cage. I guess a house really is already a sort of hamster cage, if you think about it. Anyway, while we rip these down to final size, I'd like to declare the non-essential but boy is it ever practical tool of the day. The scissor lift. You never knew how badly you needed an adjustable height mobile work surface until you've had a private dance with one. I cannot stress this enough. This is a lot of wood after all, and I really don't want to be running everything through this little planer a million times. I'm going to try and get everything done in 2 passes. It's a little less than 1/8 inch per pass, and the widest board is only 5 inches wide. If it destroys this delta, then so be it. The problem with straight knife chips is they're enormous and they keep constipating my dust collector. So I have to shut the whole thing down and administer a bottle of Jet Lax, or I'll be swimming in a sea of straight chips in no time. Okay, we're good now. Fuck. No, I refuse to do this in more than 2 passes. I'm still saving so much time. Even if the hose falls off and dust gets blown all over the basement. Even if I have to clean the dust board after every pass. I'm saving time, no matter how much time it takes. If only I had one of those, what do you call them? Tornadoes? As if this couldn't get any worse, a few small boards I left on the table saw decided to leave me with a nice little going away present. A rusty piss stain. I haven't waxed that top not even a month ago. Just wait till these piss-filled boards see what I have in store for them. While I'm feeling pretty slick after all that, the main structure of this mule will essentially be a series of big upside-down T's. An upright and a base. Mortise and tenon. Alpha and omega. And rather than spending countless hours measuring and cutting all that joinery out, we're going to trick these joints into fitting together with some cheap, sneaky parlor tricks. Okay, here's what's up. Lay it all down on your bench. Square up and clamp down one of the middle laminations flush with the bottom piece. Screw it in place. Throw a scrap lock in the middle the same width as the future tenon. Square and clamp down the other lamination. Tap the end with a hammer until the center block is tight. Now screw that lamination in place. You see where I'm going with this? Pretty nasty, right? Wait till you see what happens when glue gets involved. So here, you want the screws poking out just enough to give you solid reference on the pre-screwed holes on the other board. There is a sweet spot. You're after a tight reference, but no gaps between the boards caused by the screws. Then of course you clamp the shit out of it. The remaining board gets glued up in the usual way, but remember this. SOS. Save your screws. I didn't. At least not on the base. Just wasn't thinking, I guess. The uprights are the same in principle, but a little more complicated in practice. Each one will have 4 arm shelves that pass through the center, so voids are left for those to be slid in later. Same method as the base, just more. You may recall my priceless Douglas fir dining room table from another video. Oh no, the other one. Just the right amount of surface area I need. Not a whole lot is different about gluing these up. Spread it and forget it. But I will say, I don't spread glue too close to the voids because it will get itself in there when you put the squeeze on, and it's just more to clean up later. As you might imagine, nothing we're doing here is an exact science and may require a kiss of elbow grease to be more presentable. Just a peck on the cheek. No tongue. Not yet. Really, it's just knocking off the glue and culling down any variation in the laminations. Flatness really only matters for the base where the joinery happens. Get any squeeze out of the voids. A little edge bevel goes a long way. In fact, corner bevels do too. Applied to the arms and later the base. But not before taking a ride on my rust-coated table saw. I'll show you how we get rid of that rust later on. The bases are subjected to a beating via dado stack to carve out notches on either end for the Juncture of Assembly later on. 5 of the arms get a similar notch in their centers. Realized I did all these upside down. I gotta think fast. I'll cut the corners off and cut new corners on the other side. None will be the wiser. Oh, and it looks like I didn't point the camera low enough to catch all that, so you'll have to take my word for it. And now we shall see just how well we scam these joints into fitting together. Looks like we got them. Candidly, this isn't my first rodeo. I've done this technique a few times with other shop furniture, and it hasn't failed me yet. Just don't go building a house like this or anything else you really care about. Some of these have just enough play that you need to be double certain it's square, but there's still plenty of contact with the tenon cheeks. A few screws, just to overkill it. While we're here, the upper arm gets taken down to Pound Town. I don't bother with glue here, just raw dogged it. This is always my favorite part, the Juncture of Assembly. To start, we'll dot our I's and cross our T's, in the 3rd dimension. I start with the ends and then figure out where the center is and do that. Then I figure out the center between either end and the center and do those, for a total of 5 T's. They're terrific! Casting a few quick spells of mobility before we attempt to heave this thing over. Castratus mobilisis. Works every time. Then this upper strut thing that kinda looks like the 2 we put on the bottom gets put on the top. I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of guy who would rather take the long way home if it meant not sitting in traffic. This is how I also feel about cutting non-45 or 90-degree angles. So I just clamp the boards in their desired orientation, mark the angles, and hack away with a panel saw. It's good enough exercise. Smaller scrap will lay perpendicular to the proper lumber resting on the arms. Some down low, some up high. And that just leaves us with the shelf arms. Pretty much none of them fit in these slots anymore. That's just what happens when you work with piss-filled wood. I've read you're not supposed to shame them for it because you can cause all sorts of psychological damage. We'll just inflict physical damage. This'll set you straight. Piss on my saw, will you? Oh, I think those count as verbal. I'm sorry. I know you couldn't help it, and it was really my fault for putting you there. Please don't take this personally. It's just business. Oh shit. I think we're done? Listen, each archetype of lumber storage has its own perks and trade-offs. I've tried pretty much all of them at this point. I sought to combine the best each had to offer into one big lumbering package. So here's why I like this design. Visibility. Everything is laid out clearly before you at eye level or lower. You can easily view stock from all angles. Accessibility. Dense shelving means less digging. Small boards get their own spaces, which makes perusing easy. Efficiency. The Lumber Mule has a 3x8 by 5 foot footprint and is capable of utilizing pretty much all of it. Mobility. If you need to park this against the wall, you can simply pull it out to access the other side. Or you can commit to only having full-length boards you can pull out from the end. Now, truthfully, this is as heavy as it looks. If your floor is sloped like mine, this makes it harder to control on longer journeys. But for accessing the other side, it's not much of a problem. The Lumber Mule can also be configured to store full-length sheets of plywood. This variant is included in the plans, but I have a different vision for my own space. The best part about projects like this is finishing them. Not because they're not fun to do or they're not good practice, but because of all the other untold efficiencies they unlock from here on out in your woodwork flows. And cleaning up this space in particular is a huge stepping stone of what's to come. It lies dormant, sleeping within these boxes, and when it's finally unleashed, all hell is sure to break loose. Follow me on Instagram to watch the spectacle play out in real time, and other such updates. Thank you for choosing to watch my silly video in a sea of other algorithmically boosted silly videos. If you found this one useful or entertaining, then throw that algo a bone. Likes, comments, subscribes, shares, and I guess there's a hype button now? If you like what I do and want to support the channel, you can check out my online store, mujincontact.com, where you can find plans for the Lumber Mule, or I like coffee too. Lastly, huge thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Woodworkers Guild of America. Scan the QR code or click the link down below to join today because this offer won't last long. Almost done here, folks, but before we wrap this up for good, we have some unfinished business to take care of. Now, when I initially noticed the rust stain, I immediately put more paste wax on the area because I had more lumber to mill and I didn't want any rust stains getting on it. So the first thing we're going to do is actually remove the remaining wax with some mineral spirits trapped in a rag. Not a ton is needed here. We don't want it seeping out and coming into contact with the paint. If your rust is close to paint, or any other important surfaces, then it may be worth taping those off for this in the next step. Now, we definitely don't want to overdo it with abrasives here, so we're going to start off with a white Scotch-Brite pad. These usually don't work, sometimes they do. They're actually not abrasive in nature, they're meant to have abrasive compound added to them. And if that doesn't pan out, we'll move on up to a gray Scotch-Brite pad, which does have a little bit of a bite to it. We'll be using good old WD-40 as lubricant, and we're just going to work this in the same direction as the surface finish on the table. Yeah, it's pulling some rust off, but these stains go a little too deep. We'll tap in the gray Scotch-Brite pad here. If you're more desperate, you could work your way up to a brown Scotch-Brite pad, and as a last-ditch effort, 400 grit sandpaper. I'm going to stop right there. It's not exactly perfect, but if you keep going with the abrasives, you can get cloudy patches that become more obvious than the rust stain you were trying to erase in the first place. While I'm not exactly happy about being in this situation in the first place, I'm definitely content with these results. See, this is why you got to keep waxing your metal surfaces, even if you're in an indoor workshop. The stuff wears off after like a month. I'm going to keep sharing my mistakes so you can avoid your own pain and misery in the future. And hopefully one less setback means you're spending more time in the workshop actually getting shit done. With that, I bid you happy building. Godspeed.